Good evening. I'm Joe Aguiar with Connecticut Politics TV.
And I'm Michelle Botelho.
We appreciate you tuning in. We're going to officially be kicking off CT Politics TV with Joe Aguiar and Michelle Botelho on Monday evening. We'll give you a half an hour of all the latest headlines in Connecticut. We'll have some great guests on. Somebody like, say, for instance, the amazing Dr. Amy Chai.
Love it.
Independent candidate, 3rd Congressional District. Welcome, Amy.
Hi. Great to be here.
See you, Amy.
Oh, you too.
Now, we might even want to point out right off the top, just so everybody knows, Michelle is actually your campaign manager.
Oh,
Yes.
I didn't know anybody was supposed to know that.
It's how we were able to get Amy on the show.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. Well, she always tells me what to do, and I usually listen. Usually.
Sometimes.
She's definitely someone you want to listen to, is what I have found out so far. So you and I have spent a ton of time together of late, and it has been extremely enjoyable. And all of the interviews that I've done with you have been highly regarded by Democrats, Republicans, and everybody who has ears that can actually listen to the things that you say.
That's nice to know.
It is nice to know, you know, and it's one of those things where, like, you know, I mean, I didn't see any polling for the district. I have no idea if you have any idea what the race looks like right now.
No.
I like to think it should be a close race. Rose's races over the years have generally been blowouts. Sometimes not even an opposition candidate from the Republican Party, let alone a distinguished independent candidate like yourself.
Well, she's been campaigning very hard, and she has spent, from what I can tell from the FEC, quite a bit of money. She is doing a press release almost every day, and she is going to visit pretty much every nonprofit and every group just that she can get to. And that was after she said she wouldn't even be in the state.
Amy, I read somewhere that Rosa spent more money on pizza than Leslie DeNardis, the Republican candidate, spent overall.
I wouldn't be surprised. Some of the pizza here in New Haven, you know, it's definitely worth it.
Oh, man.
I know, right?
We did at one point try to get Rosa DeLauro to join Dr. Amy and Dr. Justin Giuliano and Dr. Leslie DeNardis, I should say. I point out DeLauro is the only one that's not a doctor here in this race. She's kind of the ding dong, if you will. But I'm just joking. Listen, I've said this. I've said this before. I like Rosa DeLauro. I respect the service she's put into this state. Her policies have
over 30 years.
Definitely not been for the best, you know, as well intentioned as she might be. You know, obviously, this state and this country is dealing with record high inflation. You've got an economy that is eventually going to crush the poor people on its way to a recession, on its way to eventually a smooth landing for everybody at the top.
Yeah. So, and this is what gets me. It's like right before the election, the Democrats are coming out with all sorts of stopgap spends for people to compensate them for some of the problems that were caused by their own bad policies.
Distractions.
Yeah, it's like, I know you're really suffering. I know it's really hurting that you can't afford oil, that you can't eat, you know, that really sucks. But you know what? Here's $5. It'll help you get through the winter.
Well,
vote for me.
the other day, Governor Malloy sent out checks to 45,000 people. It was like a $22 million program. And the average check per family was $107.
Woohoo! Oh my word. Okay.
Wow.
I mean, that would fill my gas tank up twice over a 2-week span, and that's about it.
Yeah,
You're
I
lucky to
can't
get
afford
twice.
that much of a bribe to give the
Wow.
flip over me.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
it's kind of tragic where we are right now. Again, I think, a lot of people, this is a weird state that we live in.
It is.
And the majority of the state's going to be fine. It's the elderly and it's the working poor who I'm very concerned about. I've talked to a lot of people, especially seniors, who were like, I could probably get my medicine, probably not food then. Maybe I pay rent, but then I can't pay my insurance premium. What do I do?
If you can't buy food, you won't need the insulin.
There you go.
See, that's advice from the
plan.
doctor. That's your diagnosis.
Right?
Perfect.
That's Democrat logic.
I got Amy. I was talking to an elderly couple actually that the wife and the husband had different ideologies, but they, the husband always, yes, dear.
As he should.
But they
Yeah.
always they always voted for Rosa in this district. And
Yeah.
I was talking to them about your policies and what you stand for. And, wow, really? Why haven't we heard of her? Finally, we got, I don't know, for some reason they got in touch with me on Twitter, which is great. And they're like, oh, we're going to vote for Amy. I can't believe this. Finally, a candidate we can really rely on, because, Rosa, she did okay and we're happy, but she needs to go now. I'm like, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But the problem is that if you could, if media would help, if we'd have some way to get the independent candidates, the Green Party candidates out there and get their policies out there, people wouldn't just vote. Okay, you know what? I voted for Rosa the whole time, or I voted for Democrat the whole time. I'm just going to vote that way again. And this is why we're stagnant in this country.
Yeah, it's a serious problem. And one of the things that I've heard so much in this 2022 election, not necessarily in Connecticut, the state, but nationwide, I've heard a lot of people say democracy is what's at stake in this election. And it's said very solemnly. It's like, excuse me, what democracy? I think we're living kind of in an oligarchy where the moneyed interests kind of rule over us, and we really don't have any choice other than what you offer us. And we can't get our voices out unless we have millions of dollars like you do. So I think democracy is like already kind of, nobody cares about it, at least not in the two major parties, because they don't care to represent the demos, the people.
I think ultimately, and I know a lot of people are freaked out because the stake of democracy obviously is at hand. November 8th is going to be business as usual in Washington, D.C. And November 9th, no matter what happens on the 8th, it's going to be the same thing. And it's going to be the same thing on the 10th and the 11th and the 12th. It's going to be two parties kicking problems down the road, as they always do, because Michelle and I were talking earlier today. That's how they keep their jobs, by not solving the problems.
Mm-hmm. That's
Push
right.
it off to another day.
Yep. That's why money talks. It's all about money. Who's got the most money?
Yeah, who has the most money? And I think we could really solve a lot of this problem if we just enacted something very simple, like even term limits. So people in Congress don't have to primarily deal with who do they have to please to stay in office yet another term. And for Rosa, it would be term number 17. That really shouldn't be happening, because there are certainly more people who are at least as qualified as Rosa to work in DC that may not, I don't want to say be as corrupt,
And I think she feels entitled a little bit. I think she's been in
a
office
little
so
bit.
long
A
now.
little bit. I'm sorry. Yeah, she's
No, you're right.
incredibly
She's been in office for so
entitled.
long that she feels like, okay, this is my permanent job and I'm here for good. And I don't
Yeah.
have to do any work now. Yeah.
I don't have to defend my record at all. I don't have to debate. I can just expect everyone to vote for me,
Right.
you know,
Right. I
You
think
know,
which
her
is
taking down the
terrible.
statue, though,
Yeah.
but wasn't a good thing.
as somebody who's been a lifelong Republican, right, and who's very dissatisfied with most things the Republicans are doing these days, you guys are right. I mean, the Democrats are extremely entitled to their jobs, and the idea of like, if you don't vote for us, like what are you doing? And that would work if their policies were killing it, right? Like, I mean, a lot of their social angles on things just makes more sense for most Americans, but your fiscal policies are terrible. Your immigration policies are poor. Your solutions to crime and education have yielded more problems and a more divisive country. So for the Democrats to have the audacity to be like, you can't vote for those guys, they're nuts. It's like, yeah, but you guys are not accomplishing anything.
Right. And they're leading with ideology instead of evidence. And that's a real problem. And that's why someone who, I mean, I have ideologies, but I'm not driving my policy with ideology.
Right.
And, you know, they need to come to grips with their ideology. You know, that's their reality, as they would be want to say. It's like, this is my reality. This is your reality. Well, you know what? Why don't we just figure out what works and let's do that?
And your whole life has been evidence-based, correct?
Yes, that's, you know, that's my thing is evidence, statistics, epidemiology, science, medicine, things that work. And if they don't work, you know, I'd probably be sued for malpractice pretty darn quick.
Right.
And rightly so.
What do you think about, we had spoken to Rob Hodling and Chip Beckett, the gubernatorial independent candidates. And I had mentioned about taking, you know, the experience they've had in everyday life and going to work and banking and manufacturing, what have you, and bringing it to the practical level and bringing it to a public policy level. So with your experience as a doctor, as a homeschool teacher, winning awards, a mom, just everyday life, how do you bring that practicality to public policy to help your constituents?
Well, one thing that the best piece of advice that I ever got in my life, I think, well, there were two good pieces. The first piece was the broader the base, the higher the pyramid. And that is that when you're very knowledgeable about a wide array of topics, that you'll be able to accomplish a lot. And unfortunately, a lot of politicians are only aware of politics and organizing, but they don't have any clue about anything in the real world that they might need to think about or know about. That's not true for me. I'm widely studied. I know a great deal in depth about a number of topics because the only thing I do is read and work. It's my entertainment. And then the other piece of advice that I got was actually my husband's saying that he always taught every medical student or resident that he ever taught in the operating room. And he said, before you do anything, ask yourself, am I doing the right thing? And so, am I doing the right thing has become my husband's catchphrase. And it's really very wise because when you look at something, there are two imperatives. One imperative is going to be the factual evidence imperative of whether you are actually doing the correct thing. But the other imperative is really a moral imperative, and that is, am I doing the morally appropriate thing? which would involve doing what's best for the greatest number of people, regardless of what their status is, or whether they're a donor, or whether they are a part of your party or not. So those two pieces of advice stand me, I think, in really good stead with how I would approach the office.
That's wonderful. I'm getting to know you. I mean, your whole life has been service, whether to your patients, whether to your children, whether to your home life, whether to your elderly parents. And I commend you for that.
Thanks.
So Rosa DeLauro is the chair of the Appropriations Committee. I mean, when we say she's responsible for a lot of this stuff, we're not joking, right? To say that her position really, that's literally what she does every single day. So
spends our money.
She spends our money. One of
like
the
a
things,
drunken sailor.
like a drunken sailor.
I've never met a drunken sailor.
But if you did, at least you kind of know what you'd be looking for.
I know, right?
Purple hair.
I would love to stand near a drunken sailor and, catch a few bucks. I don't know.
You could almost, again, kind of pin a lot of things on Rosa. One of the other big issues that we have is Connecticut does not get federal money back like all the other states do. We're dead last as far as that is concerned. 95 cents to the dollar. We're, again, one of the few that are not, upside down on that.
Correct. I just wonder how that equates to income, though. Is that normed for income? Like Connecticut is also. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I think that states should have money that comes back that is actually normed for income. So, because we're a small state, we do have those incredibly rich people living in certain parts of the state that shall remain nameless, that could potentially skew the data. But I'd have to look at that. But yes, it should be equitable.
Yeah, $42 million comes into the New Haven school system.
46.2, actually.
46.2.
Yes.
And the test scores are
horrible,
atrocious, I think is the word.
Beyond.
They're so unbelievably low.
Unbelievable.
It's almost, you would almost think somebody would have to gone out of their way to sabotage it for it to be as painfully low as it is.
Right. And it's like 10 to 12 percentage points less than places who you might expect to be worse, like Bridgeport.
Yeah. It's amazing. She really should be held accountable for that. And, I know she's campaigning all stealth like pizza party to pizza party, wouldn't really engage with media, wouldn't engage with her opponents because
or debates. Yes.
Yeah, she should be embarrassed by what's happening in New Haven right now.
I think she should be too, because this has been on her watch for decades. And she's done nothing about it. And it's just trended worse and worse. Even prior to the pandemic, it's been trending worse. So she's never stepped in to actually, step in and save the kids from a life of destruction that they're headed for. And I was talking to a group of parents the other day, and I mentioned the school to prison pipeline. And they said, "What are you talking about, the school to prison pipeline? We have the preschool to prison pipeline now." And I was like, oh, well, it's worse than I thought. But the parents are desperate. They're absolutely desperate. They're willing to do anything. And so am I.
Yes.
Because these are real people. These are human beings. These are lives that will be lost.
Yes. And $25,000 a student. They say a student, but where does that money go? That's what I want to know.
Good question. Give me $25,000. I'll teach you kid to read pretty darn quick.
Right.
Yeah.
And we need leaders that are going to think about our future. These kids are our future.
Yeah,
well, the other striking thing about that is, listen, you brought up Bridgeport. Hartford's test scores aren't that much better. That is 40% of the entire student body of Connecticut in those three cities.
Yes, and it's almost all minority children.
a lot of minority children.
Yeah, that if
So
that's
again,
not
when
racism, I don't know what is.
sure, right, and when people don't
Right.
understand, the education gap, it's like, well, we're showing you this. We're
Right.
showing you this. As far as the rest of the state of Connecticut, we're actually above the national average. We know
Yeah.
kids in obviously everywhere did suffer some education loss because of the pandemic. So really, for all intents and purposes, everybody is drastically behind. But the 40% of kids in the three big cities are desperately lost and behind.
Yeah. There's
Right.
definitely a gap.
Yeah. The gap is extreme, and it's uniquely extreme in Connecticut. And it's racially distributed in a way that should be offensive if you care about, equity at all, which Democrats claim that they do, but apparently they don't, as long as they get voted for. And I think, it just really hasn't crossed their mind, other than just like tossing a few breadcrumbs to, the poor or something like that. I don't know.
Seems like Chef versus O'Neill didn't ever really get us what we were looking for in the aftermath of all that.
No.
Yeah. a lot of these I don't even know how to say it. I've worked in the school system, and I've seen the disparities. I've seen the what's happening with teachers and students, and it's frustrating. Actually, you have tutors go in to help students. I know of a case where a child didn't speak any English, and not only did she not speak English, she was low, if you will. She couldn't read even in her own language, but she was placed in mainstream with a tutor.
Yeah.
So how does that child ever succeed? Where does that go? So teachers are frustrated. Teachers, they were wonderful.
Yeah, I think mainstreaming of different abilities is a horrible idea. I think it's bad for the gifted children. I think it's bad for the struggling children.
Well, you hold
The
them back,
only
or you
people,
push in front. Yes.
yeah, either they're held back, or they, the only people who do okay in mainstream, well, nobody does okay in mainstreaming, because they have to serve the lowest common denominator. And in the effort to pretend that children are all of the same ability at the same time, which is, not objectively factual, what they're doing is they're forcing everyone to basically suffer and not achieve their own potentials in some of these, mainstreaming type of things. So we need intensive tutoring for children who need it. We need children who are gifted to be separated out so they don't get held back. There's so many things that have worked well and do work well, and there's evidence for them, that we're not actually using because of, again, ideology.
Yes. And what I've noticed too is children and kids and 18-year-olds, if you will, going to apply for a job, they don't have the skills to actually speak face to face with somebody anymore, because
I know.
they're so in tune with, either just, their little phones, their computers. No one talks anymore. These kids have to learn how to interact. They're not even interacting with each other in school. They're being, during the pandemic, they were left home, what have you. I think it's a huge skill just to learn how to speak. We tried to hire someone.
Oh my goodness.
One
Yeah.
of the companies, and the poor kid, he couldn't even communicate well, if you will.
Right.
I mean, like, this is the time. Okay, this is the time you shine. Show me what you have. But I felt it was horrible to see.
Yeah, we need these little devices to be put in little cubbies, and children must not have access to these little time-sucking computer devices.
Some of the
And
adults
now it seems like there's probably even more harm coming from them, because I was just reading an article today about how sleep disruption and blue light may be contributing
Yes.
to the early puberties that we're seeing in kids that creates more depression and anxiety, early
Really?
puberty,
Oh my.
and significant problems with the children because, the brain, um,
Sure.
the brain doesn't like these unnatural things sometimes.
So crime obviously is, not the top issue, but it's certainly in the top 3 for most people.
Mhm.
Crime here in Connecticut has decreased over the last decade. The violent stuff, murder, rape, assault, that's all up. That's all up significantly. And I recently talked to Lieutenant Governor Susan Bysowitz. I said, "You guys put $100 million into mental health." She said, "No, $200 million." I said, "Oh, I stand corrected. Where did the money go, and why is it not yielding any sort of results at all?"
Mm.
Yeah, I think the number one, the government can't solve everything, but the government can make sure that best practices are used and that resources are coordinated and that people know what to do and where to get the information that they need. One of the things that I'm doing is, for example, I was working with a group in New Haven that was talking about how disciplinary practices at the schools in New Haven worsen children's mental health. Because, as you know, when children are young and they're stressed, they're lonely, they're anxious,
Yes.
they don't know how to express themselves, they want attention or they're angry or afraid. What are they going to do? They're going to act out.
Right.
And we have children like as young as kindergarten being like punished as though they were little adults for acting out. And, that's not how you restore a child.
Right.
And, whenever I've been around little kids that were acting out that way, I would just, pick them up, put them in my lap, say, "Oh, how are you doing? Are you okay?" And, they would pretty much settle down. They would stop screaming or thrashing or whatever they were doing because the reason they were acting out is because of some sort of emotional distress. And then when we punish their emotional distress, that just pushes them away from the school, pushes them away from authority, pushes them away from learning, and worsens their mental health. And that's kind of stupid.
Yeah. Absolutely.
To put it bluntly, yes, that's exactly what that is.
How
You
is
know,
this with kids?
it's so funny because, again, last night we had Rob Hoytling and Dr. Chip Beckett, the independent candidates for governor, talking to obviously you, an independent candidate, 3rd Congressional District. It's very different than when you're talking to a Democrat or a Republican, as far as just trying to get an actual answer to an actual question. And it makes you wonder if these people really do understand the issues, if they understand the human element beyond the issues. You're laughing. You're going to say no. So pick it up from here, Dr. Amy. Am I wrong? It's like they don't care.
Right.
And you're
Not
thinking, no, they have to care, but do they?
I mean, oh my goodness. I've seen a lot of people that just are so unaware of pretty much everything. Like I went to testify in Hartford once about a bill that involved school children and mental health, actually. And they were going to do this testing thing that I thought was a bad idea. And I had to explain the concept of false positives and false negatives, which I thought, okay, this is going to be a challenge. I only have 3 minutes to explain false positives and false negatives. Can I do it? And so I went up there and I used the example of a strep test. And I was like, well, if somebody has a sore throat and you use a and if one child in the classroom has a sore throat and the other ones don't, and you only have one strep test, which student are you going to use the strep test on to get the most accurate result? And then I said, well, we have this number of children in the schools. We have this many number of tests. If we do this, it'll cost this and that. So I explained it. And so when I was done explaining that, it was time for them to ask me questions. And the question was, thanks for your testimony. Can you explain how you figured out how many children go to school in Connecticut?
Wow.
And I'm like,
What
oh,
do you even say to that?
we didn't even get to the false negative and false positive part yet. It's like, wow, how did she figure out how many kids go to school in Connecticut? It's like,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
let your fingers do the walking, like right over your keyboard. It's not rocket science.
No,
I don't know.
Dr. Amy, I mean, you actually won an award homeschooling your children. I mean, that, like, I think your insight on education and how to teach a child is probably better than what most other people, especially politicians, are offering.
Well, that's true. And I also did original research in education. I coined the term learner-centered education back in, I'm not going to say what year. I published it at University of Virginia, where I taught medical faculty how to teach young physicians. And that was very fun. I really, really wanted to be an academic physician who teaches medical students, but life got in the way and kids got in the way, and that just didn't happen. But yeah, teaching my children was a great time. We had a blast. And I wrote a book about it. That's probably another show, though.
What's the name of the book?
Yeah.
It's called East, West, Love, Learn, and it won a top 10
That's awesome.
educational book award in China. Yeah, it was.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was.
See?
It was popular. I went on a lot of speaking tours in China, talking about how to educate children and how to educate teachers also. And I even was able to speak in the people's halls. They said, as long as you don't speak about politics or religion, you can say whatever you want and don't mention the word Taiwan. So I didn't. I just talked about my book and everything was fine.
Oh,
So
that's fascinating.
As an independent, I hear all the time, you're a spoiler. So you have the Democrats, you have the Republicans. They seem to, if you will, represent certain, groups of people. So do you feel as an independent that you can represent the 3rd District in the way with your values and what the people want?
I think that I can, because I believe that so many people in Connecticut, well, I don't believe it, I know it, 41% of people in Connecticut don't really identify with either party.
That's true.
And they're looking for a new political home. They're looking for change. But like I said, if you want change, you do have to vote for it. And people feel that it's risky to vote for an independent candidate because they think, oh, the independent can never win. But the truth is that if 41% of the electorate is actually neither Republican or Democrat, well,
Landslide. Yes.
that's a landslide victory if you actually go out and vote. So I don't think I'm a spoiler. I think, Rosa DeLauro is a spoiler because she spoiled a lot of lives in the 3rd District.
And I know also that you were, you had asked about the Republican candidacy to be cross-endorsed. And what happened there?
Oh, yeah. Well, when oh my goodness, Sorry about that. um, in the beginning, when I was first running, back in the winter, early spring time, there was no Republican candidate running for Connecticut District 3. And so I thought, well, Ben Proto's the chairman of the Republican Party, do have a similar goal. The Republicans would certainly love to get Rosa DeLauro out of the,
Yes.
House Appropriations chair. And they've never won in this district for like over 40 years. So I thought, well, it might be reasonable for them to cross endorse me because a lot of times the independent party has actually cross endorsed Republicans.
Many times.
So, yeah, many times. And I thought, well, why couldn't they cross endorse me? Because, we do share a lot of the same values and we both want to beat Rosa. And then if they cross endorsed me, I would have really a pretty decent chance of beating Rosa. And then he basically said, well, I can't endorse you unless you run as a Republican. And I said, well, I don't really want to do that because just in principle, I wanted to be a uniter, someone who doesn't have any kind of divisive baggage of partisan politics going on. And no matter what people may think of themselves, and certain voters are not necessarily partisan, but there's too much baggage with the political parties. And I just felt like if I'm going to be different, if I'm going to demand term limits, if I'm going to demand ranked choice voting, campaign finance reform, and unity across the aisle, I probably shouldn't run as a Republican. So that's what I said. And he said, well, we're going to have to put someone on the line. And I said, no, I understand, but it doesn't hurt to ask. So I had the courage to ask. I knew it was kind of, a long shot, but I thought he would see the possibilities there, but he didn't.
So you actually had the chance to be the Republican candidate, but you chose not to be beholden to parties.
Correct. I won't. And actually, it was kind of weird because I was talking to a group of people in downtown New Haven, and they're like, why didn't you primary Rosa as a Democrat? So it's interesting. I've heard the same things from both Republicans and Democrats saying, oh, why didn't you run as a Republican? Or why didn't you run as a Democrat? Both sides have said that. And I'm like, maybe because I can unite people. And this is proof, because I'm not being a jerk,
Right.
And I think, that's a pretty low bar again to respect people and listen to them. Don't you think?
Is it possible that people are so used to and so trained to, as Michelle has said repeatedly, pick the lesser of two evils, which is a terrible way to vote? I think far too often people are not even aware of the third party candidates. You
Right.
might not even know their name or have seen their name until literally it's election day and you're looking at a ballot and you're like, who is this?
I know.
Right?
That's
it's
just the
unfortunate
money.
because
That's the money.
we have so limited choices, but on top of that, it's not like as an independent like that the media is beating down your door to do interviews with you guys.
No. In fact, we can send out a press release and nobody shows up.
Many press releases.
Many press releases. People don't publish my op-eds. People write articles about the 3rd district race and don't mention my name in it. People publish stories about candidates, and if they manage to get me in there, they just randomly pick facts off of my website, which were not even correct. You know, showing that they lack critical reading skills. And all sorts of things that, I mean, the media was just completely disinterested in me until I started doing some things that were a little bit crazy. I can be fun, but yeah, I did some crazy things, and that's the only way I got media attention, unfortunately.
Well, we should probably talk about some of those things too, Michelle, since you were, spearheading the whole thing. Maybe we could talk a little bit about what you two have been up to and some of the fun things that you have done just to try to get it. I mean, how here's the part that upsets me is you are a brilliant person, a doctor to boot. Everything that you say is thoughtful and intelligent. And you have to do outrageous things in order for anyone to pay attention to you is such a slap in the face of democracy.
Yeah, it's a slap in the face to voters because they're not made aware of their options. It's like a type of disenfranchisement where people are not represented and they're not able to choose someone who represents how they would like to be represented in Washington. And that's wrong, I think.
You know what even gets me is when I was a candidate before campaigning as a manager, I would give my policies and my platform to people, and they'd be like, oh, this is wonderful, great. Now, I was running as a Republican at that time. And so I compared myself to, I won't say his name, George Logan.
You just said his name.
Right. It was quick.
Okay. She said it quickly, yeah.
So I compare myself in our policies, and I looked up his voting record, and the reason why now I understand the grooming part of it and why he is where he is, but
you can't say grooming. It was a different kind of grooming.
I love that.
Grooming.
I love that. Just throw the grooming bomb out
grooming
there.
part out. Got it.
Is he well groomed?
He is actually.
Oh, good. I like a sharp dressed man.
He is. He very is. Good looking guy. But the thing is that his policies, even though we were both Republicans, conservative, so-called, it depends where he had his speech. Sometimes he was moderate, sometimes he was conservative. But the people that follow the conservative group were like, oh, this is great. But then when I had no chance of running as a Republican candidate and I was able to become the independent candidate before it was stolen. Then these people started calling me a spoiler and how dare you run as an independent. I was like, hold on, wait, you liked what I stood for initially, and now I don't stand for the same thing because I'm an independent. And this is the frustrating part with voters. It's like, okay, oh yeah, you're great. You're a Republican. Okay, great. Oh, you're a Democrat. Wonderful. But really, this is the reason why we are in this predicament in this country that we are in, is because we vote for party, we vote for color, we vote for team, if you will, as opposed to people that want to really make a change. But as Joe pointed out earlier, if you change the government, then they're out of a job.
That's true.
So how do you feel when people call you a spoiler?
I feel frustrated because I wish they knew the story. I don't have enough time to tell 400,000 people the story of why I'm not a spoiler. So I guess I'll just have to run with it, and may the best candidate win.
And I know you're not a spoiler, and neither was I, but this is the mentality. Exactly. We need to change.
Yeah, we need to change that mentality. We need to change that mentality. It's really true. And it's disappointing. And the other thing is, one of the things that people have used to insult me is to say that I don't have a lot of money. And it's like,
First
well,
question.
I kind of thought that was a feature, not a bug, you know? I kind of thought that having millions of dollars from special interests was a bad thing, but maybe not. I mean, I'm not going to change my ethics. I'm not going to, lure some super
Right.
PAC with my Naughty Rosa costume.
Do you think
Um,
ranked choice voting would change that?
Oh, yes, I do. I think ranked choice voting is wonderful, and I really hope that um, I hope that Ned keeps his promise
Yes.
if he is elected this time
Why
around.
don't you elaborate on that a little bit more as to Ned should keep his promise? For anybody who doesn't know, because he is endorsed on the Griebel Frank party line, and I voted for Oz Griebel in 2018 because every debate I watched with those three guys, it was, yeah, I agree with Oz. Oh, I also agree with Oz. And I thought, well, these two ding-dongs don't know anything about anything. They all agree with Oz. Why don't we just
Vote for us.
elect that guy? That just made more sense.
I know, crazy, right?
And it's my
Yeah.
feeling now that the late Oz Griebel in a million years would have never wanted to see Ned Lamont on that
Oh,
party
no.
line.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was actually recently on a podcast with Andrew Yang and NPR. And again, they chose me because of Naughty Rosa, I'm sure of it. But they were talking about how it was great that Ned Lamont was all in favor of ranked choice voting. But I happen to know that Griebel Frank had the line and had kind of promised it to the Green Party candidate, and she's kind of all about ranked choice voting too. But Griebel Frank kind of had gotten involved with a Forward Party now, which is great. I like the Forward Party. I think they have the right idea. But then Ned came in sort of behind closed doors and said, hey, if you give me
Right.
your nomination, I will introduce ranked choice voting. And so they booted the Green candidate and put Ned on the ballot. And now the Green candidate would have probably got 3 or 4% of the vote. She's a principled woman. She's Black. She is well known. She's very smart and has a lot of ideas that are very popular. So she would have easily pulled 3 or 4%. And Ned didn't want that to happen. So he did promise the ranked choice voting. But
wasn't there
then,
a lawsuit that happened too?
well, no, this is, I mean, what happened was, no, there wasn't. That's a different one. But no, what happened was that the week after that happened, or then there was the debate with a Secretary of State candidate, and both Dominic Rapini and Stephanie Thomas were asked about ranked choice voting, and Stephanie Thomas, the hand-picked Democrat candidate representing the Ned administration, said, we believe that it's not the time is not right at this time for ranked choice voting in Connecticut. And so when I heard that, I was flabbergasted. I did a press release about it, which nobody covered, of course. And I'm saying, Ned just lied to kick this woman off the ballot. Is this newsworthy? Apparently not. So anyway.
No, and what I was saying was this happened. So he did it kind of underhandedly, but
right. He did
on the other hand, openly, we had Bob Stefanowski suing for the independent line.
Correct. I mean, Bob Stefanowski is not as good as being an underhanded slime bag as Ned is.
Right.
He's more of a
not that he's not trying.
No, he's trying very hard, but he's not subtle enough. That's the problem.
Right.
And plus, he didn't have any leverage to use. All he had was money. So he used it to bring lawsuit and to do a bunch of other underhanded things. So Ned did his thing. He did it. Nobody knew. Bob did his thing, and everybody knew. So it was it was, you know, politics all around.
Politics. There you go. I love it.
But I think Ned probably also kept, Aaron Lewis off the ballot because none of the candidates for statewide office who petitioned onto the ballot were allowed onto the ballot. And they did some illegal things. And there's a lawsuit about that against the Secretary of State of Connecticut right now. And it was heard in federal court this week. And we were supposed to potentially hear back about an injunction actually on the election. We have not heard back yet, but I guarantee that this woman who was the federal judge is being hardcore pressured not to pause the election to reprint the ballots.
So by the way, Joe, yes, we have that exclusive. You have to
We
hear
have that
about this story.
exclusive. You're going to hear about.
Interesting.
You can hear more
It'll make
dirt
history.
right here. We know
Right.
all the dirt for you.
Yeah,
That's
I
right.
mean, right, that's some fascinating stuff. And if Dr. Lewis were able to get that injunction granted, like, is it possible that they would have to move
Change the
election
ballots.
day in
Oh,
Connecticut?
yes, it is. It is. That
It
would
would
be
make
incredibly
history.
expensive. It would be history making. It
It
would be,
history.
it would, that judge would
National
be so
news.
famous.
Can
She
you
should just
imagine?
do the right thing.
Absolutely.
I heard all the details about what happened in the courtroom, and he won that case. He won that case. But she, is
I
not going to
heard-
want she's not going to want to put an injunction in. She's not.
I heard Aaron's lawyer, Dr. Aaron Lewis's lawyer,
Mhm.
she didn't go there with any bashing, any type of hitting back. She just stated, okay, these are statutes in the government, but we've changed our statutes and our laws, haven't we? With slavery, women's right to vote. And that's what she went with. And so it made this judge think twice. And so it was really refreshing, I think, for them to hear this, as opposed to, and that she didn't deny the case at all right there and then. So we'll see.
Well, yeah, and there's plenty of evidence that they didn't follow their own laws anyway.
Oh,
so,
yes. Well,
yeah.
that's an understatement. Yes.
yeah.
And so, listen, as both of you being, associated with the Independent Party, Mike Teleska, who is the chairman of the Independent Party, can you just talk a little bit about, because Mike's, from what I understand, a fantastic guy. I've only spoken to him once. He's in court a lot.
Yes.
Like,
Mike gets punched in the face all the time.
he's in court a lot, and it's not for anything he's done, obviously, but right. I mean, these two parties clearly do not want an independent party in Connecticut. And I've even got a lot of pushback from conservative listeners who don't like when I refer to unaffiliated voters as independents, because there is an independent party in Connecticut, and that's right. We're like, oh, they're not independents, they're unaffiliated. And I'm like, all right.
The Independent Party does not have a platform. It's basically ballot access for unaffiliated voters is what it is. So it actually is the unaffiliated party because we do not have a platform. Actually, the only platform is that the person is ethical and is not an extremist, basically. So anybody who is scary or inappropriate is going to be weeded out. But pretty much anybody else can get into the caucus and make their case for the ballot line. It's not about any kind of a platform.
So if I can interject, so Mike Teleska and Larry DiPillo were, I guess, partners that kind of split in the middle. And now I can say with confidence that Larry DiPillo is working for Bob Stefanowski. So Larry DiPillo apparently is an independent. Now, he was the chairman at my caucus, so I didn't have a chance either. I didn't have a chance as a Republican or an independent.
Right.
And this evening, and I'm sure if if you're out there listening and you're an independent, you probably got the phone call from Larry DePillo stating to vote for Bob Stefanowski. So like, this is the problem. Poor Mike is getting punched in the face back and forth because, he wants this party to go forward. He wants to give good candidates ballot access, but then he has another person kind of working against him. Again, part of the Republican Party or whatever, a Democrat Party, but they're always constantly in the middle. And this is where the problem lies.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of feeling in the GOP that because many of the ballot lines we have were purchased by GOP candidates buying the signatures to get on the ballot,
Right.
that they own those ballot lines. And for a long time they did because, Mike wasn't actively trying to really build a third party. But he has been actively trying, but it's
Yeah.
been hard. And to
With no
maintain
money.
those ballot lines, I mean, if you're not a major party, you will lose your ballot line if you do not run someone on that ballot line. So Mike would just say, okay, and let a Republican run on the ballot line.
And this is what they're doing. I mean, whether you're as an independent chairman being paid off, or or suing, or promising, political promises, I'll do for you. They want to keep Democrat, Republican done. No other parties, no other candidates possible. And they want to put forward their candidates. This is the problem. Yes.
Correct. And they want to choose who they put on the ballot. And that's another problem. And it's another reason why we're an oligarchy. And that's because we have two unelected bodies of people. That would be the Republican Party and the Democrat Party. Those people control who gains the ballot access to the ballot lines that they own. And then they present us with their duly created candidates for us, knowing that these candidates are expected to follow their party platform, or they're pretty much out.
Yes.
Unless something drastic happens, like somebody's able to beat them back with like a bunch of ballots or something, which is kind of rare. And so an unelected body of people controls the candidates that you're allowed to vote for. Now think about that for a minute. Is that democracy, or is that like kind of not democracy?
Yeah, and that's all we're hearing.
Yeah.
Well, I've said it's like, Baskin Robbins has 32 flavors. If 31 of them were chocolate, not really, you know what I mean? Just different variations of chocolate. It's not variety.
My husband would be so happy.
I would too.
Like his favorite flavor.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Where's
again,
my peppermint?
the illusion of choice, but there really isn't any. And they're telling you exactly who it is. And again, for someone like Michelle to try to get into a race and to find out that while people liked what she said, we already picked this guy ages ago. Like, sorry, it doesn't. It's really unfortunate, and I got to tell you, and having been fortunate to spend so much time with the both of you during this election cycle, I always kind of suspected politics was bad. It's terrible, and I don't think most people, especially here in Connecticut, would even dream things are as corrupt as they are.
They're going to find out, though.
They're going to find out.
I promise.
I like that. I like that a lot. Last thing, talk about your naughty Rosa character and tell people where they can find it, because I think
my goodness, yeah. Okay, well,
by the way, I had nothing to do with that, just so you know.
Okay,
Michelle,
that didn't sound like a Michelle.
Michelle wants to distance herself from naughty Rosa. I'm crushed. I'm hurt. So I just was like, how can I get attention? And I thought, well, it's Halloween. I'll wear, a costume. And Like normally I'll be a vampire because I kind of like bats and vampire type of things. And, everybody's a naughty something, right? At Halloween, like a naughty doctor or, a naughty librarian or something. Like I probably should have been the naughty librarian, really. But I thought, why not naughty Rosa? And so so I just kind of put little purple in my hair and wore some fishnets and had some handcuffs, and it was just all in the spirit of fun. I said, "Naughty Rosa has been bad," and I just said, like, "Why is she so naughty?" And it was just fun. But people were like,
It was.
why are you so insane? And I'm like, I'm not insane. You looked at it, didn't you?
That's where we are, right? That's like, hey, I'm just trying to get some attention because my brilliant ideas are being ignored, as are my press releases. Here's anything, which is funny because you know what? I mean, it put in the same situation. A Democrat or Republican would definitely do whatever it took. So the idea that an independent is making some moves or doing extreme things like renting airplanes and calling on Rosa DeLauro to resign with air messages, which was also amazing.
And Joe, actually, naughty Rosa got some attention.
She did. It was the fishnets, I think.
That's what caught my eye. I'll be honest. I was like, oh, naughty Rosa, hello. Interesting.
Yeah. I don't usually go there.
Her website is docchai2022.com. That's DOCCHAI 2022.com. This is an excellent candidate. If you're not happy with Rosa and there's no way you would vote for Dr. Leslie DeNardis, here's your option. She's great. She's in the middle. She makes a lot of sense. I think sometimes that kind of scares people.
Common sense.
It's almost too good to be true.
Scary.
Right? Election night, Joe, right? Do we have a full production going on?
Yeah, we're gonna do full on election coverage. We'll start at 5. We'll go right till the polls close at 8, maybe even later. We'll see how things are going. So we're very excited about that. Yeah, Dr. Amy Chai, always love spending time with you. You are amazing. Thank you for being our guest this evening.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Have a great night.
You too.
For my friend Michelle Botelho, I'm Joe Aguiar. Thank you so much for watching CT Politics TV.